Hi, I'm Nick Haig, and I'm the host of the World's Greatest Business Thinkers podcast. Herminia Ibarra is a professor of organisational behaviour at London Business School that over the last 25 years has served on the INSEAD and Harvard Business School faculties. Herminia is an authority on leadership and career development and is ranked by Thinkers 50 as one of the world's top management thinkers. She's the author of two best-selling books, Act Like a Leader, Think Like a Leader, and Working Identity. And both have been recently updated and republished. So today we'll be delving into both and touching on the topic of leadership and also career advancement. I know you'll enjoy this episode, so let's dive straight in. Welcome to the World's Greatest Business Thinkers podcast, Herminia.
Hey, thank you, Nick. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, I'm delighted. Because for those listeners who haven't heard Herminia speak before, then, well, where the hell have you been? But I interviewed her on my previous podcast and just had to get her on my show when I launched this new podcast, as her book, Working Identity, was a catalyst for me leaving my old company behind and creating this new podcast show. Herminia will do a lot better job of introducing herself than I ever would. So I'll pass over to you just for some background on who you are and also where you work.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I'm a career academic. I've been a professor all my working life. I teach at London Business School, and a lot of what I do is research and writing on the topic of people's careers, the transitions that they make as they try to move up into bigger leadership roles, as they try to move on or out into new and different careers, all of those kinds of movements that make the modern day career.
And I think, both of those books are definitely topics that we're going to touch on today. I can see you've got them in the background there. I've read through both of them as well, so they're on my shelves at this end here. As you say, a world authority on leadership and career advancement. And, you're recently updated two books. One's called Act Like a Leader, Think Like a Leader, and the other, Working Identity, that we touched in my previous podcast. Both fabulous books, provide practical guidance on not only how to become a better leader, but also move your career to another level. And both books published over 10 years ago. Working Identity was actually published 20 years ago, I think, wasn't it? So
Working Identity 20 years ago. Act Like a Leader is more recent. It came out in 2015 in the first edition.
Right, okay.
But a lot has changed since then.
Well, it has, and actually that was going to be my lead in. The world has changed dramatically even over the last 10 years,
Yeah.
never mind 20 years. So was that the reason for updating both books?
Yeah, slightly different situations for each of them. With Act Like a Leader, Think Like a Leader, the book came out right when the whole digital transformation revolution was heating up.
Yeah.
And so much about leadership really became about helping lead those transformations in organizations, and not just leading the transformations, but what kind of challenges that implied for the leaders in terms of their leadership style and how they led and motivated and got the most out of people. And I had continued doing work on that, and then teaching about the ideas of Act Like a Leader. And my editor really wanted me to update the book to take those things into account. For example, I had done quite a bit of work on the leader as coach, and that was not in the book, and so I added it because it was a really important part of the leader's role
Yeah.
as it is today, and people have come to expect it. So that was Act Like a Leader. The role of the leader has transformed quite a bit over the last decade. The other book, Working Identity, which has a subtitle called Unconventional Strategies for Reinventing Your Career. In that case, I really didn't need to add much new material because, in fact, career change remains today the process that I kind of deciphered and illustrated with people's stories. It's just that we're doing a lot more of it.
Yeah.
We're much more conscious of the need to reinvent ourselves, There's more things pushing us in that direction, whether it's living longer, whether it's technology change, whether it's our companies morphing and restructuring, whether it's what we want out of our lives and careers. All of that has evolved a lot. And what was interesting for me is that even though we're doing a lot more of it, it still remains really difficult for people. The difficulties remain there.
Yeah.
And so we just thought it's just more relevant than it's ever been before. Let's get it out, update it on whatever it needs, but the basic model really does hold.
Yeah. Well, and as I say, it definitely resonated with myself when I was reading through it. I suppose things as social expectations may have changed in the last 20 years,
I
in the
think
fact that we,
we
yeah,
expect to, we're supposed to disrupt ourselves. We expect to have a less linear career, all of those things. But when push comes to shove and you hate what you're doing and want to do something else or end up getting restructured out of a job, it's still just as challenging as it was 20 years ago.
yeah, yeah. Well, we'll come on to that, and that whole process and the model that maybe people can use in order to transgress through career changes. Just sticking on the leadership piece for the moment, and obviously lots of change going on since COVID. But do you think the subject of leadership has changed, and especially I suppose with the onset of AI and in the age of AI that we're going into, is that affecting leadership at all?
Right. So when I first wrote Act Like a Leader, Think Like a Leader, one of the kind of really salient models and ideas about leadership was the idea of authentic leadership,
Mm,
which is still something that we care a lot about today and think about today. Since then, the thing that has really become more salient, it's not that it's new, but has become more salient, is leadership for creating a learning organization, because change is constant, and it's not change in the old fashioned sense that you planned something 5 years out and rolled it out, but much more iterative, experimental, try things. You're not so sure where it's headed. I mean, look at ChatGPT. We didn't know that was going to come out and change everything in November. um, so it really is more how you lead in such a way that the organization is more agile, that people are more adaptive, that leaders are able to create more fast cycle learning and apply it constantly, whether it's from customers or from internally in the organization or even the ecosystem. So, all of that is, I think, models of leadership today, whether it's about how you deal with a person or how you deal with an organization, are going to emphasize learning much more so.
yeah, yeah. It's funny you should say about authenticity there. I noted from a video I was watching of yours just recently that you'd done the count. I think it was a TEDx discussion that you, and we're spending so much money now just to be ourselves. Everything's it needs to be authentic now, doesn't it? And I think you've done
Yeah.
the homework in the fact of the last 10 years. The word count, if you look at Google Trends, then it's over three times. It's tripled over the last 10 years. So yeah, it's everyone's jumping on that authenticity bandwagon.
Yeah.
What I do know from your book, Working Identity, is that the path of career transition is definitely not simple. It's not a linear process and more of this crooked journey, uncertainty on the way. Um, but your books, both of your books, but your books lean on frameworks a lot in order to deliver this structure and help with decision making for the reader. Um, is there a particular framework or model in Working Identity that
Sure, there's a
helps people
framework
navigate?
and there's a process, and we know it works. We've got 20 years behind it now. For example, right now at the London Business School, I'm just finishing up an online course that we did called Career Change at 50 Plus. And we put people through the process over the course of 4 months, where they go through it, doing the different exercises in the book in small groups with coaches, and it's a process that works. It's tried and true. It's just it's uncomfortable in the sense that it's a different kind of process than people are used to. The normal process is first figure out what you want, who you are, what you want, and then the steps follow, obviously implemented. But the problem is people know what they don't want and they don't know what they want instead. And so if they wait until they've figured it out, they're not going to figure it out in their heads. And so nothing happens. The process has three parts. It really is quite simple. It's well, you could call it about four parts. You, instead of figuring out what you want and who you are, you say, what's a list of possibilities that have some promise, have some appeal, are crazy fantasies, are things that are options, but I don't really want to do, like the whole core dump brainstorming list of my possible selves in the future. Start with that.
Yeah.
And very quickly move into creating experiments to test them out. So that's the first part, crafting experiments. Second is shifting your network in the direction of people and places and communities that can help you connect and test and learn more, have informational interviews, maybe leads, but also role models, inspiration. Really start to shift your network from your past to your future, and in a way that allows you to test out some of these experiments and some of these ideas. And then the third part, or the fourth, well, fourth part is making sense, and that is figuring out what's the plot line, in the new story, because the old story has kind of fallen apart, and why does this make sense? Both figuring it out for yourself, but also figuring out in a way that you can tell it to other people, and then they'll help you, or they'll hire you, or they'll fund you. But you have to tell a story that kind of makes sense. And that's the part that's a little bit more about reflecting on what you've learned in creating those experiments and in networking in different directions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it's there's these processes, these stages, if you like, within the model. So you can't rush it, can you? I mean, it's a process. It
No,
does take time.
no, that's the part that always is the difficult part. It always takes longer than you think.
Yeah.
And when you try to rush it, you're more likely to take a job that is a change of job, but not a change in the sense of really corresponding to what you were looking for. The things that come earlier and easier tend to be quite close to what you used to do. And often in this process, people want something else.
B2B Frameworks is a curated collection of proven business frameworks to develop your strategic thinking skills, solve your biggest business problems, and unlock your next promotion. Our mission is to help you achieve these goals. We want to create the next generation of successful business leaders by providing the tools and frameworks needed to create effective strategies that drive business growth. Each framework comes with a downloadable set of instructions with large, colourful diagrams and editable templates to guide you through the process step by step and prompt you to consider the problem from every possible angle. Along with audio guides and educational tools, our extensive content library is full of real-world examples and case studies of strategic thinking in action. So why learn with B2B Frameworks? We've carefully curated only the most effective, proven business and marketing frameworks. Our downloadable materials and audio guides will help you easily apply each framework. And the insights and advice you'll find across the site are based on 30 years of consulting experience from one of the world's leading business strategy experts, Paul Haig. B2B Frameworks is a small investment to advance your career or grow your business. Start your journey to becoming a successful business leader by joining B2B Frameworks today. Connected to your book on leadership, I recently read one of your articles in the Harvard Business Review entitled "The Leader as a Coach," and you've referenced to adding to some of those extra bits within the new book as well around coaching
Yeah.
itself. And it talked exactly about that. The role of a manager is becoming a coach. Sir John Whitmore, who I'm sure many of our listeners have heard of, widely acknowledged as the father of coaching for performance, and you reference his model, the GROW model, in this article to get action from mentoring. Can you talk to our listeners about this model, this four of those steps, and how you put this into practice?
Sure. So I guess if I can take a step back, one of the things that keeps us from being better coaches is that we have a misconception of what coaching is.
Mm.
And people's kind of like primitive idea of coaching is I, the older and wiser, give advice to you. And I tell you, here's how I did it, or here's what you ought to do. And that's not coaching, that's giving advice, that's mentoring, it's other thing, giving feedback. Coaching is really more about engaging in a process with another person that helps them clarify their thinking and fulfill their potential. And so it really does hinge on the art of the question and kind of a more non directive process where I'm trying to pull out of you what you're trying to accomplish and what you've tried and what you might do so that you find your own solutions and are therefore more committed to it. And so people get that, but we have spent our whole lives doling out advice or getting advice. And so it's a habit that's hard to break, for
Yeah.
one. Um, Second, when they're not very skilled at coaching, they get frustrated because they go, oh, okay, I've got to ask questions. So they ask a question, but they really have an answer in mind that they want to get, and the other person doesn't give that answer. And so they ask another question that is starts to get a little bit more confusing. The other person starts to understand they're not answering the way they're supposed to. And the conversation becomes kind of dysfunctional. And so what part of what the grow model does, it helps you structure a non-directive conversation so that it leads somewhere. It's not just anything goes. And it's an acronym, so GROW. It starts with the G, which is goal. And it starts with the coach saying, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to do? We've got 30 minutes. What would be useful to you in this conversation? Or, what do you want to accomplish in your career, or where do you want to go in your career? Or, but what do you want to do? What do you want to do?
Yeah.
R is reality, which is kind of the background that helps us understand that goal and maybe why it is challenging. More often when you're being coached, it's because it's challenging. And so already you're not starting the conversation with the person saying, let me give you a little background, which can be a little bit crazy making because sometimes that goes on for a very long time and you don't know what they're trying to achieve or where it's going. So you always start with, what are you trying to achieve? And when then the person launches into the background, it's helpful to keep that goal front and center. And if it's not well defined, keep coming back to, well, I'm still not clear on what it is that you're really trying to achieve here. So that's the R. O is options.
I think just to interrupt that, and what I found really interesting is, you ask like you say, you ask the questions. It's rooted in it, the when, where, and who to get to the reality of what you're looking to do, but never asking why. Because I'm a ex researcher, but there was always a why in there, and I thought it really interesting. You don't ask the why because that's people are exploring reasons and motivations rather than the facts if they ask the other questions.
Yeah, I mean, there's no forbidden question. I think the concern with the why often is that you're being kind of judgmental. And if you're truly facilitating in a non-directive way, you're there to help the person figure out the how, not the why.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
really about how to get action.
yeah,
So always the options. What options have you tried? What have you seen done? What have you considered? What have you tried already? What might you try next? What are the pros and cons of that? And then W is will. What are you going to do coming out of this meeting?
yeah,
So
yeah,
it does leave you. It does take you through a path and leaves you with a really clear action agenda.
yeah. No, it definitely does, and yeah, it's well. So John Whitmore, he was an interesting character, wasn't he? He was also a racing driver. I think he won European Tour Car Championship and raced in Le Mans. So yeah, very very interesting, but a great model in which to use and to grow, you know, to grow through to use that
Yep,
to coach within your organisations.
sure.
We've talked about some of your business frameworks that you use in your books, as well as the Grow model. And thinking through all the different business frameworks that have been created throughout time. This is a tough one, I realize, but do you, or can you plumb for a favorite business framework, and who developed it, and why is it your favorite framework?
I love the Stephen Covey urgent by important 2 by 2. It's simple as all heck, but it's just so basic and such a good reminder. Where is it on those 2 axes? Is it important? Yes, no. Is it urgent? Yes, no. And how can I use that to make better use of my time? Because a lot of what I deal with is people not being strategic enough in their use of their time. They want to do this, but in fact, their day to day is not helping them move in that direction. So
Yeah,
that's a framework that I like a great deal. It's a
yeah.
lot of ones we could talk about.
No, there are, but I think those simple 2 by 2 frameworks are often the best, aren't they? Two simple axes in order to get action. And I know I've used that a lot. When coming to the end of a workshop and trying to get action out of the back of it. What's important, what's urgent, and where should we start to then place resource behind it to make action happen?
Mm.
To conclude, I'd like to answer the final round of questions that I ask all my guests. Just interested in the first instance, what you're reading at the moment.
Right. So I am I'm completely immersed in writing a new book about career change in later careers. So I've been reading a lot of books kind of around the topics that have to do with that. And I've been rereading actually Sheena Iyengar's book, The Art of Choosing,
Right.
because there's so much involved in, it's how we think about choices and decisions. So I've been rereading that and getting a lot out of it. Yeah,
There's a lot to be said about going back and rereading books as well,
yeah,
isn't there?
yeah. There's a whole little pile that I'm rereading right now.
And for those of you that are watching us having this conversation, you can see behind Herminia that there's definitely a lot of books
A
there.
lot of books. There's a lot of books. I'm also rereading Teresa Amabile, former colleague at Harvard Business School, her book, The Progress Principle, about the importance of small wins on a day-to-day basis that create a sense of progress and positive emotions that create momentum in things that obviously take time. And that's really important in the process of career change.
When can we expect this new book? Is there any?
Oh, those things are a little bit hard to predict.
Sure.
I probably would guess early 2026, but maybe towards the end of next year. Who knows?
Yeah. No, I
Depends on how
definitely know.
fast I can write.
Well, it's not. Yeah. Even once the book's written, it's not a quick process, is it?
Exactly.
So,
It's not a quick process.
yeah. Um, and what's the best business book, apart from those that we've mentioned today, of course, that you'd recommend our listeners to read?
I mean, there is every manner of business book from self-help to you know from a leadership standpoint, I like Jim Collins' Good to Great a
Yeah.
lot. It has fantastic metaphors and ideas in it. um there's just so many things that I could recommend in the space of career transitions. I like the old classic by Bill Bridges, simply called Transitions, that really makes you think about what's happening psychologically. So
Yeah.
there's two examples for you.
I know it's a tough choice, and in fact, I was speaking to Wendy Smith, and we were talking about Jim Collins and Good to Great, and that really does stand the test of time. Different companies, come and go, but
Yes,
principles that stand behind
but
it. For
the
sure.
ideas stand the test of
Absolutely.
time.
What's the best piece of business advice you've ever been given?
I'm not a business person, so I haven't really ever gotten or given. I mean, I have never really gotten business advice. I was thinking about it since you gave me the question, um, and I think probably the best bit of career advice was very early in my career, where I knew I was interested in my field of organizational behavior. I was doing my undergraduate studies in psychology, and there was a senior professor who did work in this field of organizational behavior. But my advisor, who was the head of the department, said, um, you're interested in doing a PhD in doctoral work, it's research and publication that makes all the difference. This person is not involved in that anymore. So even if the topic interests you, I think you should work with this other person who's really kind of an up and coming researcher, publishing in the right places, and you will learn how to do research in a way that helps you get into a good PhD program. And that was spot on advice, which I took and ended up at Yale PhD program.
Yeah. I mean, one piece of advice that was given to me was, make sure you never stop learning. And I think when I read your book and you referenced Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, and he talked about, that having that never stopping learning, the growth mindset, and how he
Learning
turned around.
mentality. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that really is his mantra. But Nick, all these things are true and they're trite. And so it is important never to stop learning and to follow your passion and to be yourself and all of those things. And so I don't love those kinds of advice because
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I did like the way I'm paraphrasing now, but to shift from being know-it-alls to
that's
learn-it-alls. I
very good.
definitely, yeah,
That's
I
very good.
definitely,
That's
I
very
like that.
sticky.
It
Very,
is,
very sticky.
yeah. So yeah, that way it stuck with me for sure when I was reading the book. You maybe not in business, but do you have a business leader? You reference them in the books. Do you have a business leader that you most admire, and why?
So this is a question I refuse to answer in the sense that you don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
I'm not present in any of these organizations. I can write a case study. I can interview the person. I can look from afar, but I don't really know what's going on. I've seen too many of my colleagues identify our icons and role models, and they're in jail a couple of years later.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Well,
I don't. I write case studies about some of these people and we discuss them. Do you like them? Do you not like them? Have they been effective? Have they not? But I don't weigh in on that.
I take that. I grant you a pass on that, Herminia. So no problem there. Well, my final question then is, and this could be from the field of academics, but it also could be from the from the field of business. Who would you like me to reach out to? Who would you be interested in me inviting to come on this podcast in the future to talk business and business frameworks?
So, one of my colleagues at London Business School, Dan Cable, has been doing really interesting work in positive psychology. And one of his last books is called Alive at Work, which is how to, as a leader, how to create that spark and help nurture that spark in people and create the kind of engagement that is so often missing. So he's somebody, and always interesting to talk to. He's somebody I would highly recommend.
Well, I will reach out to Dan, and let's look at diaries, and hopefully we can coordinate and get him on a future episode. So that's great. Thanks for that recommendation. Herminia, I want to thank you for joining me today again. I love both your books, and as already mentioned, they have influenced the decisions I've made in my career. So I urge the listeners to not only buy the books, but take action, try new things. Through experiences, experimentation, I can promise you personally, it helps provide you with new information of what's important to you and how you should invest your time and guide you on who you want to be. And I think there's to end on this, I think there's a really nice case around that at the back end of Act Like a Leader, Think Like a Leader. It's I wasn't aware of this, but you mentioned that Steve Jobs took a calligraphy course when he dropped out of college, and he never would have expected this side interest to have had such profound consequences on his later achievements. And so it's just keep trying different things, because you never quite know how to the join the dots and where it will take you in the future.
Absolutely. He said that very well. You can only connect them backwards.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yes.
thank you so much. Thank you for reading the books, for asking me great questions. And if anybody wants to have a look, one of them is about moving up and the other's about moving out. So usually people have one or the other situation they're more interested in than the other.
Absolutely. And if they do have any questions for you, how best to get in touch?
LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn.
And your website, which has got
And
a wealth of
my
information.
website is unidirectional, and there's no no chat and email functionality there, but they can definitely read all my articles on that website. There's lots of videos and materials. So herminiaibarra.com is a great resource for all the different things that I talk about.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Well, thank you again. It has been a pleasure, much appreciated, and look
Thank
forward
you, Nick.
to reaching out to your colleague, and that our paths cross in the near future too.
Cool. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.